Bravo 6. Going dark.
Start clear!
Victor 6-4, green light.
Hey, what is up everybody? It's Exocool360 back here with another video, and this time it's going to be a bit different. I'm going to be doing a review on the 2019 Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Now my hair's a bit of a mess, but we don't got to worry about any of that. This is the review. We are here now, and I'm excited to do this, you know, to get some of my thoughts out there and tell you what I think of the game, if you should buy it, or you maybe should just hold off until there's a sale and whatnot. We're going to get into all of that and whatnot. And of course, I'm going to be breaking this down to all of the game modes, the 3 game modes that there are. I haven't gone to play Survival because I haven't gotten on my PS4 yet, but whenever they do add Survival, if they add it sooner or later, or they do that stupid, you know, console exclusive thing for a whole year, but, you know, we'll get to that later in the video. But of course, there's the 3 game modes. There's the campaign, the multiplayer, and Spec Ops. Now, of course, I'm going to start with the story. Now, I'm going to say it, I really did enjoy this story a lot. I feel like it's one of the best Call of Duty campaigns that we've ever seen. It had amazing writing. I feel like all the characters had pretty good writing to them. The story was well told, and I mean, honestly, the characters all felt pretty like realistic, and they did feel like actual humans, unlike other stories that, you know, they kind of feel generic and bland and whatnot in their storytelling and whatnot. But around this time, I really felt impressed with the, you know, the voice acting and just the game itself. It felt really realistic. It felt really fast paced in the story. There were some parts where it slowed down a bit during the stealth missions with where you're going through with Captain Price, you know, clearing out the house of the terrorist leaders and whatnot. I'm not going to get into any spoilers and whatnot. I might do a future video on that, but for right now, I'm just going to keep it at a minimum of no spoilers throughout this video and whatnot. So if you haven't gotten to play it and you really want to play it, I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. So, you know what, I'm doing this for all of you out there. There are technically 4 main characters that you experience with and play with. You technically usually play as 2, or I guess 3 if you count the flashbacks. There's Kyle, Alex, and Farah. And all 3 of these characters come from different positions in the world. Farah comes from the Middle East of this country. I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't want to try butchering it, but that's where she comes from. Alex comes from the United States. He is a Marine, he's practically going undercover throughout most of the game. And then there's Kyle, he used to be a UK policeman, but of course his entire story changes throughout the game. And of course we have the big man Captain Price out there, you know what I'm saying. Now, as again, I'm not going to go into much detail with all the characters and whatnot, because personally I don't want to spoil anything. That's just their names and what they were and whatnot, because honestly this story is really good and I highly suggest people go out and play it. If you've been wanting to play another Call of Duty game that has an amazing story, this is a Call of Duty game that you need to play like right now, because the story is so well told. It's a great story to play through. There's just so much to it that I wish I could get into, but as again, I don't want to spoil anything. But I'm going to be talking about some of my likes in the story and some of my dislikes in the story. Now, starting off with some of my likes, I like the gritty, mature version of this Call of Duty. I like this mature version of this Modern Warfare. I know Modern Warfare has always kind of been like this mature game, but I feel like they went all out with this one. There's so much just graphic stuff in this game that it blew my mind, and it made me just sit there and I just had to think about it for a second. I mean, the second game in is one of the most graphic parts you will see in the entire game. That's how fast the action and the story hits you, that you're like, okay, I know what I'm doing. But as again, not going to spoil it. But yeah, I like the mature nature of this new Call of Duty. I feel like they're going in the right direction with this story. It tells a very gritty, horrific story of modern war, and I feel like that's a very good way to go, in my opinion, as a Call of Duty game. Because as of recent, Call of Duty games have just told these bland stories that just haven't interested me. Now, note, I haven't played Call of Duty World War II or Infinite Warfare, and I heard Infinite Warfare had a good story, but for me, Infinite Warfare just did not interest me whatsoever. But Modern Warfare did do a good job of having excellent storytelling and just being able to, grab the player's attention and whatnot. They did a really, really good job with that. The AI around this time is a bit better, in my opinion. They do kind of think outside the box, but it's the same old Call of Duty AI as usual. They're not really much smarter, but they do think a bit harder when they try coming up with tactics on how to get to the player, and you kind of have to think on how you want to approach certain things, especially with the stealth missions in the game. It's really interesting to see on what direction they went with this game and what they did. Another thing too is that they told the story from multiple perspectives, which is something I don't think any other Call of Duty has done except for like World at War. I know the older Modern Warfares did it and whatnot. Why did I say it's like a never before seen? But I feel like it's really a lot more interesting around this time, because older Call of Duty games, the main protagonist wouldn't ever speak, and around this time they actually do. God damn, my hair is messed up. But around this time they actually do. They all tell their own stories and how they're feeling and what their motives are behind everything. It's really, really well, panned out and actually made. They made their writing team is amazing. It's beyond amazing, and I highly suggest, as I said before, go and play this story. It is one of the best Call of Duty stories of all time. It's easily the best one in the current generation of consoles. It is the pinnacle of Call of Duty campaigns at this point. And I would even put it in my top 10 best Call of Duty campaigns of all time. That's how good I actually think it is. Another thing too is that I'm going to say this, and a lot of people might actually disagree with me, but I actually like this Captain Price a hell of a lot more than the older Captain Prices. My brother-in-law, he actually said that it was probably, it was a toss-up whether he liked the older Captain Price or he liked the newer one. But when I finished the campaign, I easily liked the newer one a hell of a lot more. I feel like he had more of a grittiness to him. Not saying the older Captain Price did not, but I feel like he took more control in most situations, in my opinion. I know that older Captain Price did that, but I feel like Captain Price had more of a, how am I gonna put this? It almost felt like he had more of a commanding point in this game as an actual captain in the game. You honestly look up to him as like this role model throughout the entire game. You're like, yeah, I want to be like Captain Price. It's honestly pretty amazing. With the character writing and whatnot, it was really well done, especially with the voice acting. I was kind of skeptical at the trailer release with the new Captain Price. Everybody's like, oh, Captain Price is getting this new voice actor and whatnot. But in my opinion, after I played it, I really did enjoy this new voice actor and whatnot. I feel like he did a really good Captain Price. I feel like he made Captain Price actually, just more of a mature Captain Price in my opinion. And I feel like it was really well done. Now, of course, my favorite main protagonist that you play as has to be Kyle. Kyle had one of the best, main character stories of all time. He comes from just being a police officer. I want to get into it, but as again, I don't want to spoil it. I don't, but yet I just want to talk about it. But Kyle just has this unexpected story that, he goes from one person up to this big thing and whatnot. And he's this unexpected character at the end that everybody loves, but you probably won't know who I'm talking about, but it blew my mind at the end. It's just absolutely insane. The missions felt really diverse in every single one. I mean, I felt like there wasn't a lot of repetitive nature in the game. I feel like most of the game you were doing a lot more than just, oh, shoot this bad guy and shoot this bad guy. I mean, that's all Call of Duty is, but I feel like there was a lot more of a change for this Call of Duty. I feel like the story team was like, okay, you know what, we want to do something a bit different that Call of Duty's never seen before. And I really did enjoy it, because I didn't want to just have an entire campaign where I just went around just doing the same objective, shoot a couple bad guys and hooray, the war is over. it's over. We did it. Good guys won. You know, type of Call of Duty nature. But around this time, it's not, because you got stealth missions. You got missions where you have to blend in. You have missions where you're a child, which I will not tell you who the child is, but you play as a child in the campaign. You get flashbacks and whatnot. It's really well told around this time. As I've said before, I know I'm giving this campaign a lot of praise, but it really deserves it, and I feel like a lot of people aren't giving it the praise it deserves. But I can understand why people aren't doing it, because of the whole entire Russian war crimes that are perceived in the game and whatnot. But I'm not trying to get political here and whatnot, so I'm just going to leave that off for other people to discuss if you want to get into that, because this is just my review and what I think of it. But other than that, the Russian war crimes and whatnot, it doesn't really bother me that much. I mean, just a simple, research on the topic, you'll be able to discover, you're like, oh, hey, Russia didn't actually do that. But, I feel like people are really overreacting about it, in my opinion. That's just my opinion on it. But, as again, I don't really want to get into it. As again, a very political thing to talk about, so we're just going to move past it. There are multiple main villains in the game. There's the Wolf, and there's Barkov. And Wolf is this terrorist leader of this, I can never remember how to pronounce it, no matter how many times I play through it. I can't pronounce it whatsoever. Then of course, General Barkov is a general of the Russian army, and those are the two main villains, but there's another villain that comes out throughout the game that is kind of a shock that I didn't really expect, which, was really impressive in my opinion. People say Call of Duty's cliche, but I really feel like this Call of Duty isn't that cliche, in my opinion. It was really well done, and as again, it was really, really mature around this time. So, what, props to Infinity Ward for making more of an adult Call of Duty campaign, to say the least, and whatnot. But of course, that's all I really got to say about the campaign. I probably forgot a couple things that I really did like about it, but those were the main things. Now we're going to get on to the things that I just did not like whatsoever. Now, the one main thing is that there's only 14 missions in the entire game, and the game lasts about 5 to 6 hours. Now, mind you, I was playing the entire game on Harden. I feel like Harden's a pretty good balance between being possible but still giving you a challenge. I mean, I obviously died a couple times and whatnot, but I still felt like I got a challenge. But I beat the game all in one day, so it's really, really short, and it makes me kind of realize, it's like, damn, I really want to play more because it was really good, but yet most of the time it's like, oh, here's like 5 or 6 hours of a story. But honestly, it doesn't really surprise me, because most Call of Duty campaigns aren't really ever long. They're usually pretty short, but the really short ones are like really, really good. Like if you look at Black Ops or Black Ops 2, Modern Warfare 3, Modern Warfare 2, Modern Warfare, those games are the longest, but they are really good stories to play through if you never played through them. But yeah, that's one thing I didn't really like about it, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It's a Call of Duty game. It's obviously going to be short. Another thing too about the campaign story is that the game kind of slows down after you make it like through 60% of the game, because I said, although it is a very adult, mature based Call of Duty game, all the, I guess you could say, edgy parts of the game are like kind of at the start, the whole way up to halfway through the game. Then like after that, nothing really interesting or intriguing happens. It just, I don't know how to explain it, but the game felt just bland afterwards. I mean, the story was good, okay, don't get me wrong, but I felt like there was nothing to grab my attention after, I would say, the flashback and whatnot, the first flashback that you experience. But after that, really, it kind of fell short when it tried going and trying to make something, I guess, edgy and whatnot. Because the edgy scenes that they tried playing afterwards and they tried making you do were already used before, and you already know what to expect. So it's just kind of like one of those things where you're like, oh well, already seen it. it's just that's the only real thing that I can, those are the things that I can really think of that's bad about the story. As again, the character writing is amazing, the writing for the story is great, the characters are great, the voice acting is great. Overall, I would highly suggest playing the campaign. I would even say that it's the best game mode out of the entire game itself. It's really good, and it really captures what Modern Warfare is. And I really felt like it did accomplish what it needed to do, and I felt like the developers kept their word with the story and whatnot, and you know what, props on them. But yeah, that's gonna be it for the story, and now off to the multiplayer section of the game. Alright everybody, it is now on to the multiplayer section of the game. It's a new day. I decided to just kind of, you know, stop recording and whatnot because I knew that was gonna take a long time, and you know, basic stuff like that. So now we are on to the multiplayer of the side of the review and whatnot, and I have an actual kind of script that I can read off of my pros and cons. Hopefully this one won't be too long. I'm gonna try keeping it at 10 minutes for this segment and whatnot, so it's not too long, and you know, we can move on faster with the review because the story one took way too long, I feel like. So I'm gonna try keeping it simple and short so it keeps your guys' attention and whatnot. So yeah, let's get into it, you know, to not waste any more time. So the pros of the multiplayer that I feel like are really good about the multiplayer is, of course, the game modes. I feel like the game modes, they're recycled from older Call of Duty games like Team Deathmatch, Free For All, Kill Confirmed, Domination, Hardpoint, yada yada yada. But there's one new game mode that really caught my eye and is honestly my favorite game mode in all of multiplayer that, in my opinion, that actually takes skill and whatnot, is Gunfight. Now, Gunfight is one of the more interesting modes that I'm glad they included because it's a very competitive, it's fun to play, I really enjoyed it. Basically, it's a 2v2 mode where you and a teammate have to successfully go out and basically just kill the other team, or else it goes into overtime and you basically have to capture a flag and stuff like that. There's multiple ways to win the game mode. You either have to eliminate the other team, or you have to run down the clock, and if your team has more health you can win, or you can capture the flag, which is a very interesting change up nevertheless. There is, of course, multiple maps. I have played on all of the maps and whatnot. I'm not going to go through all the maps because that would take way too long. But some of my favorites are these maps right here. I know I don't know the names of them, but these are personally some of my favorite maps to play on. They are well balanced. I feel like each team has a fair amount of time to get to one spot without being overrun and whatnot, and I feel like it works really well with this game mode and as a map and whatnot. I mean, there's other maps in there that I just don't really like because I feel like it gives more of it doesn't work well as a 2v2 mode. I feel like some of those maps just don't work well in my opinion. But yeah, that's all I gotta say about Gunfight. I mean, it's really simple. You just start out with a loadout every 2 rounds and whatnot, and you basically have to fight to the death and stuff like that. I'll probably show a lot of gameplay because that's the most played game mode I have so far, because I just find it way more fun than any of the other game modes, because it does actually take skill and whatnot, and you don't just have the set loadout that you start with in every single ordinary other match that you usually play in multiplayer. The gameplay, as I said with the story, everything feels really nice gameplay wise. It feels realistic. It still has a Call of Duty formula. It still feels really fast paced and whatnot. It does really feel good around this time. Black Ops 4, in my opinion, felt really clunky, and it just did not feel good in my opinion. Black Ops 3 had amazing movement and whatnot. It felt smooth and fluid. Not talking about multiplayer, because I know a lot of people didn't really like the multiplayer, but the movement felt smooth, and I feel like it feels smooth around this time. It just flows really, really good. Plus, with gunplay and whatnot, the guns do feel realistic around this time. They do feel like actual guns and whatnot, because I know Call of Duty has the stigma of, oh, the guns don't seem realistic, but around this time they do feel like they actually have firepower behind them, and yeah, I feel like the guns do actually feel realistic and whatnot, and you know, that's a good thing in my opinion. I feel like they're not trying to be Battlefield, but yet trying to take the stuff that makes Battlefield, and they're trying to incorporate the stuff that makes Battlefield, you know, feel realistic and smooth and whatnot. So I mean, I feel like it's a good choice on what they did with it. I know a lot of people might not like it because it's too realistic, but in my opinion, I think it works well. I feel like the health is balanced out. You're not going to be you know, you're not going to shoot at somebody and they're going to feel overpowered like in Black Ops 4, but also you're not going to feel powerful because you're going to be dead in like a couple of hits. So, I mean, I feel like it's well balanced, and sometimes it can be aggravating, but most of the time I feel like it's pretty well balanced and whatnot. So, good on them. So another thing too, as I just said with gunplay, the guns, there's so many guns in this game. It's mind-blowing on how many guns there are. I'm not going to go through all of them. As I said, I'm just going to keep this limited so I can get through this pretty fast. There's, of course, the assault rifles, there's the SMGs, there's the light machine guns, shotguns, marksman rifles, sniper rifles, and of course our fan favorite, the riot shield, makes a return. Overall, most of the guns do feel like they're really spaced out, and I feel like they got most of the guns that most players would be able to use and personalize themselves. And one of my pros about this is the gunsmith, and the gunsmith actually feels like a gunsmith, because the cool thing I heard before the game, before it launched, is that you're able to customize a weapon in any way, shape, or form. So, like for example, you can turn an AK-47 into an AK-74. You can turn it into an RPD, I believe. You can do all sorts of stuff for all sorts of other guns. I mean, hell, you can turn an M4 into an AR-15 if you wanted to. There's so much variety and player choice in the gunsmith, so I really like that. I feel like it gives the player a lot more choice and a lot more control over the guns that they're using, and it adds more replayability to the game. The unlocks around this time actually feel like unlocks. They're not hidden behind a paywall, at least not yet. Because I kind of wanted to wait on this review because, you know, Call of Duty works in weird ways. Like last year, people were giving it good reviews at launch, then eventually they added the black market, but right now there's been no black market added, so that's a good thing in my opinion. I don't know when they're going to add it. The black market is basically a tier system that they used in Black Ops 4, and it's kind of an iffy situation if they're going to hide weapons behind that, because they usually hide the weapons far into the tier that most casual players will not ever get, and you know, it's more of a grind to get those weapons and whatnot, which it sucks, but you know, it happens, and I hope that they don't really do this. I hope there's a fair way of getting the weapons like they did with World War II and Modern Warfare Remastered, where you can earn credits to get the weapons and whatnot. So I really hope they do something like that, so the player base isn't split, so it's like a pay to win, and the people that actually play it and try grinding to get those weapons. That's just my thoughts on it. But yeah, the unlocks actually feel like older Call of Duties, where you actually have to reach that certain level before you unlock them and whatnot, and it feels like you're rewarded actually with your hard work trying to get to that level and whatnot. So it's really well done. I really like that. It feels smooth. It feels really good. The ranking is super good. I feel like it's you know, perfectly balanced, where at the start you rank up fast and you feel like you want to keep going for more and whatnot. It feels really good, and you know, props to them. As I said before, it does feel really good. And the game does not slow down whatsoever, but we'll get a little bit more into that with the cons, but right now I still have a little bit more. I have two more things for the pros that I feel like are really big deals, which is the free content. Now, this Friday, or I guess whenever this video goes up, the one Friday they actually added 2 new maps and a brand new game mode, which is great. I'm glad that they did that for free content instead of you know, splitting the player base like they normally do. That, you know, props on Activision for, you know, not splitting the player base for once, thank God. But yeah, they're adding free content avidly, which is amazing because it will keep the player base going, and it will make the player base more willing to play the game if they add more free content and whatnot. So, you know, that props to them for doing that. They keep it this way, I feel like Call of Duty will actually thrive once again. So, you know, props on Activision for releasing free content. They're going to do this throughout the life cycle of Modern Warfare, and who knows, it might go into next year if Modern Warfare does good until then, but we can only hope. Now, the next thing is the factions and operators. Now, before you're like, oh my god, they added operators again, I'm not going to buy the game. Hear me out. The operators are completely different around this time. They do not have specialties. They it's nothing like that of the sorts. It's they're just characters that you can choose and you can play as. So basically they just have different cosmetic things to them and whatnot. So the factions are really interesting. There's a coalition and the allegiance in the game, and I feel like they both work really well for the multiplayer story in that way. There's, I would say, close to 20 operators all combined, and they're probably going to add more throughout the season of Modern Warfare. So you know what, I feel like that's a really good choice to go down. As again, there's no operator weapons and whatnot like in Black Ops 4 or Black Ops 3 and whatnot, or Infinite Warfare and yada yada yada, all that. So it's all based on cosmetic. Nothing, the operators don't affect the game in any type of way, which I'm a huge fan of, that they're not going down an operator route. So, you know, thankfully for that, we're not getting that around this time, hopefully not. But yeah, that's all for my pros. Now we're gonna move on to the cons, and this is where the multiplayer really starts, you know, to just grind my gears, and I just don't like whatsoever, because the multiplayer, I feel like this is where it lacks the most. It makes me not want to play it. So you have to balance it out, because not all of it is good, but so far what I listed, those are all the best parts about it. Here are the ones that you just can't ignore, because you can't just go in and be like, oh, those are problems, I can ignore them. It's nothing like that. So of course, for my first con is play styles. Now right now, if they add in more maps, which will be good, because right now the maps are extremely campy. And if you don't like camping, which I hope you do, I hope you don't like camping, this game's not for you. the game's not for you. It's a very campy game, which I'll put up a video clip here of one of my teammates literally camping for I don't know how long. I just recorded him for like 30 seconds and he was still there the entire time. Good on you, buddy. You're real good. But this is one of the biggest play styles, and I feel like it ruins the game. Even Infinity Ward literally said, they're like, oh, we want the game to be more noob friendly instead of pro friendly, which is a bad way to go, because most of the people that are going to be playing your new Call of Duty game are pros, and not everybody's going to want to play and be in that play style, because everybody wants to have a fair chance, everybody wants to be able to play, and I feel like this is not the way to go, because getting easy kills isn't satisfying whatsoever. So in my opinion, it's not a good way to go for this game. But yeah, that's for the play styles. It's extremely frustrating to get into a match, and most of the enemy team or your team is just camping the entire time, because then it rubs off on the enemy team, and it's a bad experience all around and whatnot. So I do not like the play styles, and if they make more maps that are less campy, good on them, because that is the correct way to go. Because right now the maps are really campy and they're just not fun to play. Oh boy, one of my least favorite things in this game of all time is shotguns. Now right now, there was a nerf that just went out for the 725 shotgun, and this thing is literally a sniper throughout most of the game. I was literally playing with Dax the other day on Search and Destroy, and he was sniping people with the 725, and I wish I recorded it just to show you on how OP it is. I also recorded another clip using the 725. It was the beta bonus that you got if you get level 10. This thing is nothing short from overpowered. This thing is overpowered as fuck. This thing is overpowered as hell. And it's the easiest weapon to use. It is the easiest weapon you'll ever use in the entire game, because it's so overpowered. It has such long range to it. It's just stupid. It's stupidly easy to use, and people go to it as an easy way to get kills, and I don't like that whatsoever. It's it's too easy to use. That's all there is to it. And the shotguns are way too OP for most players, and it's an unfair advantage. That's all it is. There's nothing else to it. Now, the last thing I want to talk about for multiplayer is the maps. It's hard for me because most maps are really bad in this game, especially maps like Piccadilly. And this map is a weird kind of one-lane map. And if one player or the one team locks down all the spawns, you're screwed. You're going to be spawn camped the entire match, and there's no way to get around it because most of the time people are going to be using snipers, or they're going to be camping with shotguns, and this map just sucks ass so much, and I hate playing on it, and I leave every single time because I just hate playing on the map. That is the only map I've ever left on in any Call of Duty that I just refuse to play, because this is obviously, in my opinion, the worst map in Modern Warfare, easily. I know a lot of people talk about the bridge map, but in my opinion, that's one of my favorite maps in the entire game, because it's a very open map. There's not a lot of places to camp. It feels really diverse, and it feels like there's a lot of ways to move around. I don't know why a lot of people hate it. I've played on it a couple times, and I've really enjoyed it every single time I played on it because nobody's able to camp. So I mean, I don't know why people are complaining about it. But yeah, that's all I gotta say for the maps. That's all I gotta say for the multiplayer. I feel like I got most of it summarized because I didn't want to take too long in this and whatnot, to keep your attention and whatnot. So yeah, I'm gonna move on to Spec Ops, and so yeah, we're gonna move on to that. Okay, now we are on to the Spec Ops game mode, and as again with the multiplayer, I'm gonna try going through this pretty briefly and make it really simplistic. I am dying of a heat stroke. What's different? Okay, so here are my pros. The very first pro I have is huge levels. Now, I know a lot of people, this might turn them off, but for me, I really do enjoy the huge levels for each of the 4 Spec Ops missions and whatnot. I feel like it's a good way to go. A lot of people might be like, oh, but yeah, that's a lot of traveling. But for me, I really do enjoy it because it feels like you're actually, you know, trying to take down this operation, you know, kind of realistic military operations and whatnot, modern day operations and yada yada yada, all that stuff. But yeah, huge levels is a nice addition. It's just, that's all I really gotta say. The levels are huge. There's so much in them. The levels don't really feel bland. I feel like it's pretty diverse and whatnot, so you know what, props on them. So yeah, I mean, most of the levels are pretty huge. Actually, I would say all the levels are pretty huge, so in my opinion, it's fun. It's fun for me. The next one is that players can choose to tackle every single special ops in different ways, really. I mean, and what I mean by different ways is that you can, you know, you're like, okay, how am I gonna tackle this enemy that I have to kill? You can either go in guns blazing, or you can go in stealthily, or you can go in from the rooftop, or you can, you know, set up traps and whatnot. It all together, it feels like it's really heavily based on player choice, and you know, that's a great thing in my opinion. It feels really, it honestly feels great. I'm glad that I'm able to, as a player, choose what I want to do and how I want to tackle certain objectives in the game and whatnot. So that's another pro in my opinion. The next pro is that players have vehicles around this time. You can drive vehicles and whatnot. You can drive trucks, I believe. I don't know, I haven't really made it too far into Spec Ops. I have a general idea, so I'm not really going to say how the Spec Ops missions are when you beat them and whatnot. But there are vehicles in the game that you can use to get around. So great on them. So you're not just stuck with you know, being on foot the entire game, really. So props to that. Good job. The next thing is that the missions are really long. I guess I could say this is more of a pro and a con, because although the missions are really long and it keeps the players going, sometimes it can feel way too long, and most of the time I feel like I'm playing for like half an hour and the mission's like, it might be close to done, but most of the time it's nowhere near being close to done, and I will get down to the cons on why it's nowhere close to being done. But I do like the longer missions, and sometimes I don't, so it's a love-hate relationship in my opinion. The next and last pro in my opinion is, of course, different objectives. Now there's always going to be a different objective, like I know there's one operation, I believe it's the last one that you play, is you go through and you have to download download certain intel to, you know, rescue this one person. Then after that you have to bring them back to one position, defend that position. They have to be on an evac that you go down and you help this ACP get around and whatnot. It's all together. There's many different objectives throughout the entire game, in the level in general, which feels just this breath of fresh air that it just feels great in my opinion. It's, as they said, it's on a new scale, which they weren't lying. It is overall just a great experience to have, especially if you're playing with friends and whatnot. So yeah, so I mean, I just really like it because it's always something new. You're not doing the same thing. So yeah, let's move on to the cons. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, Jared, you're just bad at the game. You don't like difficulty, but hear me out. This goes with the two cons I have, and it is difficulty and unfairness. Sometimes the game can feel way too difficult in Spec Ops. I mean, I'm talking way too difficult. Even for me, an avid Call of Duty player, it just, I feel like sometimes you just get outnumbered way too fast because there's too many enemies spawning at once. You're getting hit with RPGs and you're getting hit with tanks and you got juggernauts moving everywhere. You just feel overrun all the time, and I feel like you just can't do anything about it because if you go out and you try killing some enemies, 4 hits and you're dead. That's what it feels like. I just feel like there's a level of unfairness there that most players, most casual players, aren't going to be able to ever beat a Spec Ops mission, ever. And I do like difficulty, I really do. I feel like difficulty is an important factor in this type of game, but that is way too hard even for me. Like, even Dax said, he was like, this stuff is way too hard. Even some of the times you're either getting overrun or there's 2 juggernauts there gunning you down. There's tanks and whatnot. I mean, like, I like the fact that there's all these different enemies, but most of the time the average player isn't going to be able to tackle most of this without being downed, and I just feel like it's way too hard most of the time. And even with the respawns, you have to wait a whole minute to respawn, and most of that time the team won't even last a minute at all. So I mean, it's the difficulty and unfairness seems a little bit rough. I'm not saying I don't like the difficulty, as I said once before, but it does seem unfair. That's all it is to it. It feels really unfair to the average player. It's just, that's it. There's nothing else to it. I just feel like you're overrun most of the time, and you can't do anything about it. The next one that I want to talk about, which bothers me so much, is that it feels like there's no team players whatsoever. I usually have to start out with being the team player, like reviving people or laying down my specialty. I usually use stopping power rounds. That's what I usually play as, and people kind of catch on, but I feel like most people should already know what to do. This isn't like a solo running gun game mode that you can just go off and do whatever you want. You need to play as a team, but most people don't do that. They just run off and do their own thing. Most of the time you can't get anything done. Now, I'm not saying every single player is like this. I've gotten into some lobbies where the entire team is stuck together. We helped each other out by laying down ammo or armor, explosives and whatnot. You know, you can get into those matches, but I would say 80% of the matches you get into, people aren't going to be team players at all. And I'm not saying Call of Duty is the only game that does this. There's tons of games out there like Battlefield that people aren't ever going to be like team players whatsoever. They're just out there to get kills and whatnot. But as a team effort game mode, it just does not work. So sometimes I kind of wish there was a solo mode or a private match that you could just play with your friends and just your friends only. Like, that's what I hope they add, because we desperately need it. Now, another thing, and this is my last con for the entire thing, is that people give up way too easily. If they go down and they don't get revived, they just end up just quitting. They don't wait to be respawned, they just end up quitting. Because as I said, with the unfairness, there's obviously people going down and when they go down and they're not getting revived because other players are being shot, they end up quitting because nobody can revive them. And it goes hand in hand with the difficulty and the unfairness, because it's so hard trying to revive people because you're obviously going to get shot at, and your other teammates can't do anything about it because they're like low health already. So people do give up way too easy in this game mode, which I feel like it does not fit well with me. It does not sit where it should sit. It just does not feel right, in my opinion, because people quit way too damn easy. So that's my last con. But so far, I really do like Spec Ops. I feel like it's a good game mode that just needs a little bit more work done to it, and I feel like it could be near perfect, honestly. I mean, if they just add more onto it, do some balance updates where it makes it a bit easier on players, more quality of life updates, I feel like it could be a just near perfect game mode for Call of Duty, because not everybody wants to play multiplayer. Just, I can understand that, because as I listed in the multiplayer section, people are usually camping or using shotguns, so not everybody wants to play multiplayer, but it's not really user-friendly in Spec Ops. So that's kind of my criticism for all the game modes and whatnot. So now we're gonna get on to the conclusion and whatnot, and I'm gonna score it based on a ranking of 1 to 10. Here comes my conclusion. To basically conclude the entire game, I feel like it's a pretty solid game. I feel like they just need to do some nerfing for certain weapons. I feel like they need to make the maps just a bit less campy and whatnot. I feel like the Spec Ops just needs to have a bit of an easier time with players. I feel like the game's really solid. I really do. I feel like the game does a well job of you know, delivering what it needs to deliver as a Call of Duty game. I feel like it's a new breath of fresh air for Call of Duty fans for the first time in a while. The story is great, the voice acting is great, the multiplayer can be fun if you actually get into those matches without the campers or, you know, people running around with shotguns. But yeah, I mean, overall the game is really good. I really did enjoy it. I really did enjoy the gameplay. I enjoyed everything that the game had to offer. I feel like they did a really good job with this game so far. So as again, they just need to fix up a couple things, nerf and buff certain weapons and whatnot. But yeah, I feel like the game's pretty solid, and here comes down to my final score. So I'm going to be scoring Modern Warfare. It's kind of a toss-up for me. I do want to give it a 6, but something's telling me I want to give it a 7. I feel like I'm going to sit at a solid 6.5 out of 10. If they patch up a couple things, I might put it to a 7. But I feel like my criticisms were pretty fair of the game. But yeah, so far it did a really good job, but there's certain things that hold it back. I hope with more time as the game goes on, it will get better, and that's basically it. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this review. If you guys did go on to enjoy it, make sure you leave a like, comment if you did agree with me or if you disagreed with me on this. I want to hear your thoughts about this game. If you didn't like it or if you did like it, tell me about it. I want to hear everybody's opinion on it. And yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.